in Kinston, North Carolina, and welcome to our Bible study. I want you to know that there is a chat feature available. Apparently, it says on the bottom of my screen. And if you'd like to comment as we're going along, that's fine. Also, want you to know that there in the past have been some delays on some of the transmissions. So if you want to go back and review them, that would be a welcome thing. Please contact me at revlev@nccumc.org if you have any questions or comments or snide remarks. But we look forward to hearing from you and welcome you to our Bible study this morning. We have a good class today. We have an interesting topic. The first part of it is kind of, I don't know, has to do with festivals and things like that. But the second part is a real challenge. And it's chapter 23 in the book of Exodus. And we're going to start picking it up at verse 10. Okay, so this is the sabbatical year and the Sabbath. 6 years you shall sow your land and gather its yield. By the way, some of this stuff has been handled in previous. You'll see stuff reiterated as you go through Scripture over and over again. Some of the passages that we have in Exodus are reiterated in Deuteronomy and in Judges and many other books of the Bible. But you'll see that there is not only a reiteration, but sometimes even a restatement in a way that might differ a little bit from the original. So it's interesting to see how things progress as you go through Scripture. Okay, 6 years you shall sow your land and gather in its yield, but the seventh year you shall let it rest and lie fallow, so the poor of your people may eat, and that they may leave what they leave, the wild animals may eat. You shall do the same with your vineyard and your olive orchards. I think we've covered that last week. Okay, so let's go down. It's actually verse 14 where we should pick up on the annual festivals. 3 times in the year you shall hold a festival for me. You shall observe the festival of the unleavened bread as I commanded you. That's Passover. You shall eat unleavened bread for 7 days at the appointed time in the month of Abib, for in it you came out of Egypt. So it's a celebration of their exit from Egypt. No one shall appear before me empty-handed. That's kind of interesting.
What does that mean?
It means,
Have to have a sacrifice?
yeah, you've got to have a sacrifice. You've got to have something.
Even if it's a dove.
Even if it's a dove,
Turtle dove.
a turtle dove, or whatever. Okay, but there is an implied standard for the community. Like, for instance, we're going to see all the males are supposed to appear. Okay, but what if somebody shows up and they don't have anything? Will you help them with that? Will you give them something so that they don't come empty-handed? Okay? Rather than saying, well, you didn't have anything, you can't be here, you know? So the question is, does the community help the person who doesn't have anything, or do they condemn them? Got a question there. So think about when Jesus fed the 5,000, how many people ostensibly showed up empty-handed?
How much that was?
Well,
4,999.
I'll tell you what, there's no Jewish family that's going to show up empty-handed.
Oh,
Okay, they just, mama ain't going to let that happen. You're not going to embarrass me by not having something. So there was food out there. Okay, but the question is, would they share it? Okay. All right. You shall observe the festival of the harvest of the first fruits of your labor of what you sow in the field. You shall observe the festival of ingathering at the end of the year, when you gather in the field, from the field, the fruit of your labor. 3 times in the year your male shall appear before the Lord God. Okay, so you have here a compulsory participation, very much like the compulsory participation that was required during the British Empire. People had to show up at church at least once a month. If you didn't show up, you were fined or you were whipped. So, you know, I think the class size would be a little bit larger if we had something like that.
I think it ought to be like that now.
Well, the reason why that was made compulsory was not for religious purposes. The reason it was made compulsory in the British Empire is that the church was where the civic information was disseminated during the announcements. So if there was a new law passed or an ordinance or something like that, everybody had to be made aware of it. And since most people didn't read, you had to come to church to find out what was going on. You could get a dispensation if you were what they called a dissenter, someone who was not Church of England. Okay? Some dissenters were allowed and some were not. Catholics were generally not allowed, but Quakers, Baptists, some other denominations, they had to be licensed essentially to even have a church by the rector of the Church of England in order to have services in the colonies. So we've come a long way from that, but this is the church is not necessarily where you get your civic announcements anymore. So it is not compulsory. Okay, and that's one of the things that we did away with fairly rapidly when we became a nation. Okay. You shall not offer the blood of sacrifice with anything unleavened, or let the fat of my festival remain until the morning. So what they're doing here is emulating some of the guidance that they had during Passover. You don't leave anything. Okay, you eat the meal, you eat the whole meal, you don't leave any scraps, there's not going to be any leftovers. Okay, because we're getting out of here, you're not going to be eating leftovers. So that's what they were trying to say in Passover.
Is that where my mother got that from?
What?
I ain't going to talk about your mama.
Oh, was.
Ain't your plate up.
Yep. Yep. And you know that people have been starving in China when I was a kid.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and I was wondering, how could they get these carrots and peas? But anyway. The choicest of your first fruits, of the first fruits of your ground, you shall bring into the house of the Lord your God. So they're saying that if you're going to give it to God, it's got to be your best labor. Okay? Now, how is that played out? It's not just a matter of this is an agrarian society, so of course you look at the first fruits and the best produce of your land. But we look at that also in terms of how they constructed the tabernacle during the Exodus, that they had the best stuff went into the tabernacle. How do we look at it for churches? You look at some of the cathedrals that have been built over the years, and my goodness, they brought the very best. I mean, these were very poor societies, and yet they brought just elegant, wealthy stuff into the cathedrals, the best things, okay? And so the principle is still the same. You bring the best that you can. When you bring something to God, you bring the best that you can bring, okay? Because it's a way of showing respect.
And that's why you always had Sunday clothes growing up.
And that's why you always had Sunday clothes growing up.
Any other time but Sunday.
That's right. Now, okay, and if you think that this is something that, well, we should just have everybody can dress any way they want. Okay, there is a parable that Jesus talked about where there was a wedding and invitations went out to everybody and nobody wanted to show up. They all had excuses why they didn't show up. I don't know who was getting married, but they didn't want to show up. So the father of the bride put out an invitation to everybody out in the streets. Anybody who wants to come, okay? And they came, but one guy showed up without a wedding garment. And they threw him out into outer darkness. Okay? So should you dress up for church? Yeah,
If you can.
if you can. You come in the best you can.
Right.
You come in the best you can. So that's just a principle that goes way, way back. But you bring the first fruits, you bring the best. Another one here is part of the dietary restrictions of kosher. You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. That's considered kind of a desecration. And if you go to a kosher home, you'll see that there are separate dishes for dairy and for meat. You can't have them in the same vicinity.
Even separate refrigerators.
Separate refrigerators. Yeah. Yeah, if they get really strict about it, you can't put those two things together. And the idea is that potentially, you don't know where the dairy product came from, and you don't know if the meat was related to the milk producer, so just to be safe.
Wow.
Okay, but that's where a lot of the kosher restrictions come from.
So is that why in New York you mostly get a lot of pizza with no pepperoni on it? They have cheese pizza.
Yeah,
They don't put meat on it.
that's right. That's right.
I always wondered that.
Yeah, because there's a lot of Jewish people eat pizza.
Some places you can get.
I have kind of a humorous story along that line. It's about kosher. My dad worked in a fish market when he was a kid, and he would clean up. And when they went to the Fulton Fish Market, which was all mobbed up and everything, if you didn't guard your truck, people would steal the fish off the back of your truck. So he was the truck guard, make sure nobody took the fish off the truck. And the guy that he worked for made a wonderful Manhattan clam chowder. My dad could make a really great Manhattan clam chowder. And he had, it was in a Jewish neighborhood, he had a lot of Jewish customers, okay? And part of the ingredients to clam chowder is bacon and, or fatback. And if you're making a really good Manhattan clam chowder, you're gonna have that in there, okay? So people would come in and say, is there bacon in this? And what he would do is take the bacon out after he had cooked it. I said, no, there's no bacon in here. Okay. I said, okay, fine. But the problem is, clams are not kosher. So you'd actually have to take the clams out of the clam chowder for it to be kosher. But they were more concerned about the bacon part. Anyway.
I haven't tried it with bacon, but it sounds good.
Oh, it's Manhattan clam chowder? Great.
I like clam chowder as long as it's not spicy going.
Oh, well, this stuff, it was really good. My dad really liked the guys at the local garage, and he'd make a big pot of clam chowder for them. Of course, they'd never had Manhattan clam chowder. And so I went over there one day, and sure enough, Dad was over there with a pot of clam chowder for the guys. I said, have you ever had Manhattan clam chowder before? They said, no. I said, you know how you can tell it's authentic? He said, no, how can you tell? I said, he's serving it out of the trunk.
Conch chowder tastes exactly like clam chowder.
What does?
Conch chowder.
Oh, I'll bet it does. Yeah.
Yeah, when I lived in Key West, I tried it for the first time, but if I ever saw the thing that comes out of the shell,
Yeah.
and then somebody killed it and made it, I would eat it.
Oh, that's a shame.
That's the ugly thing, it's like a monster.
Yeah, my family was not kosher. We'd go to Coney Island, eat clams on the half shell and oysters, Rockefeller and all that, but All right. We're getting into the next section. Okay, this is the conquest of Canaan. And there's some things in here that I think are important for us to try and understand. I am going to send an angel in front of you to guard you on the way and to bring you to the place that I have prepared. That sounds really good, doesn't it? I'm going to send an angel in front of you, okay? Be attentive to him and listen to his voice. Do not rebel against him, for he will not pardon your transgression, for my name is in him. So the angel has been delegated the authority to pardon or not.
The authorities of what?
Pardon.
Pardon?
Pardon.
Pardon.
Yeah.
Yeah, or D-O-U.
Yeah, or to hold you guilty. The angel has the authority to do that.
How do we know who the angel is?
Well, you had the confrontation with Joshua before Jericho. And I think this specifically refers to that. Okay? I will be an enemy to your enemies and a foe to your foes. All right? But if you listen attentively to his voice and do all that I say, then I will be an enemy to your enemy and a foe to your foes. When my angel goes in front of you and brings you to the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and I blot them out. I blot them out. Okay? You shall not bow down to their gods or serve or follow their practices, but you shall utterly demolish them and break their pillars in pieces. You shall serve the Lord your God, and I will bless your bread and your water, and I will take sickness away from among you. No one shall miscarry or be barren in your land. I will fulfill the number of your days. Okay. So if that's the case, we don't have any biblical record that this actually was going on in Israel. We don't have a record that people were immune or that there were no miscarriages. It's a promise that God made, but we don't see the promise actually written down as fulfilled.
But they didn't carry out what God says here. They didn't blot out completely these nations.
Okay, good point. That's a good point, okay? They didn't do what God said. All right.
Oh, so that's why they didn't get what they.
Well, now God said God was going to blot them out. How is God going to blot them out?
Through the Jews.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The Jews are gonna go into battle, and God is gonna be with them.
Yeah.
And they're gonna kill their adversaries.
Yeah.
With the strength from God. God many times works through man.
Okay. Oops, I'm terrible at this.
One of the scariest things I remember reading about Israel traveling, and they were carrying the Ark of the Covenant,
Yep.
was when it almost fell over, and one of the people out there reached
Yeah.
to grab it, keep it from falling over,
Yeah.
and God struck him dead right there.
Yes, I know, and there was a big controversy over whether God should have done that. People were really mad at God for doing that. Okay, but this is different. Okay, we're going back to first principles. What are first principles?
What God told them to do.
Okay, very good. Okay, in our own country, what's a first principle?
Bill of Rights.
The Bill of Rights. Okay, there's even a principle that goes before that.
Articles of Confederation.
Articles of Confederation before that.
Here before my time.
Mayflower Compact.
Huh? Yeah, Mayflower Compact, okay. There are first principles in the Mayflower Compact. Okay, there are first principles in the, I forget what they called it, but when they set up at Jamestown, they set up a governmental system, okay? But a first principle that was all under the British Empire, okay? A first principle for our nation was in the Declaration of Independence. Okay, what are some of the first principles that you see in the Declaration of Independence?
All men are created equal.
All men are created equal. Okay,
Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Is
yes,
that in there?
yes, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. First principles. Okay,
Freedom of religion. That's not.
that's kind of in there, but not specifically. Okay, so I'm walking away from my camera. I better stay here. I'm back. I'm sorry. Sorry, I hope you missed me. Anyway, but we're talking here about, I tried to get out of the way so you can see first principles. Okay, so like our but you can't see it very well. It's very light. Okay, the Declaration of Independence is a first principle for our country. Okay, everything that proceeds after that should conform to the reason that we gave for the nation to be formed. Okay, so when they wrote the Articles of Confederation, the Articles of Confederation were supposed to conform to the principles that are found in the Declaration of Independence. When the Articles of Confederation were not functional, and they wrote the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the United States was supposed to conform to the first principles as well, but it did not. And so that's why you had the Bill of Rights, so that that document would conform to the first principles. Okay? Our reason for being, it can be delineated out into different laws and stuff, but our reason for being is a central thing that holds us together. Okay? And it's what legitimized our breaking off from Great Britain. So, what are first principles for this people? What was the founding thing for this
God,
nation? Okay, God, but God,
Ten Commandments.
no. Before the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments proceeded from the first principles.
I would think the first would be, I will be your God, you should have no other gods before me, and.
Well, that's the commandments.
Okay.
Okay, the first
Leave
principle,
Earth.
huh?
Gather your people and leave Earth.
That's right. And I did that. I left I was there. Okay. Just showing you that Ur is human. So anyway. Okay, first principle was the covenant with Abraham. The first principle was the covenant with Abraham. Okay. There's several things contained in that first principle. One is that you're going to go away from your homeland. You are going to another place. And that eventually, in the covenant, this will be your homeland. This will be the homeland for generations to come. And it will be filled by your progeny that will be more than the sand of the sea and the stars of the heaven. Okay? Okay, that was part of it. The second part was, and through you, the nations of the world will be blessed.
Through you people.
Through you and your progeny, down through the ages, the nations of the world shall be blessed.
And your people shall be my people.
And your people will be my people, right? Okay, and I'll be their God and all that. So this is the thing, but it really was for Abraham to accept that first principle.
Wow.
Okay? So he accepted the first principle. Now we're getting into the invasion of Canaan. And God is saying, I will blot them out. I'm not sure that that's a blessing.
Not if you're a Canaanite.
Not if you're a Canaanite. Okay? Not if you're a Canaanite. Because God is not converting them,
He's blocking them out.
God is destroying them.
Hold on, we got to have a whole lot of discussion about this.
Yeah, why do you think that he was destroyed then, just for the Israelites? Even if they didn't bring no harm to Israelites?
Well, God felt like the influence of their religion was detrimental to the community. It flew in the face of the covenant with Abraham. Okay? That there would be one God.
We got to back up.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to discuss, next week.
yeah. We're going to be talking about this quite a bit because virtually all of the Pentateuch, and then you get into Joshua and Judges, and you see time and time and time again where this first principle of the covenant with Abraham is not only blatantly violated,
Wow.
but it's endorsed.
Yeah, you look at that two ways. You say, why would God blot out these people? But as it turned out, they didn't blot them out.
No.
And it was the downfall of the Israelites,
Yeah.
the Jews.
And God said that that's what would happen.
They worshiped
Okay.
their gods, they intermarried, and this was what happened.
But do you have a zero-sum situation? Okay, do you have a zero-sum situation? Either they stay alive and corrupt you,
Correct.
or you blot them out and destroy them and establish a pure nation. Okay? Is there some place in between?
It could be.
Well, that's the point. That's the point. And that's the thing that we're going to be getting into as we go further, not just with this chapter, but there are a whole lot of chapters like this all throughout the Pentateuch and into Joshua and Judges and many books following. A justification for genocide. And we've got to see whether or not this is something that was an edict from God, because God is the same, we all agree, God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Am I right? Okay, is that a principle that we all follow?
Yes.
Okay, well, maybe not. Okay, so, well, God bless you, and I know this is disturbing. Email me if you don't like it. And,
Can you change it?
huh? And come on back and see us next week. But I look forward to hearing from you. This is going to be a really tough discussion. And it is contemporary. I want you to know that it's contemporary because people wonder, why is there such friction in the Middle East between Arabs and Jews? And
Israel and Isaac.
yeah, that's right. Well, it's not just genetic, okay? It stems from not just the first principles, but it also stems from the first events. Okay? And we, we're going to see how this affects whether or not we can actually talk across cultures. Okay, well, God bless you. Glad to have you in the study today. And don't leave us. This is going to be interesting.
Thank you, Dennis.